Hey, y'all, and welcome to season one, episode seven of the podcast of Rebuilding Your Life After Trauma. I am your host, Shanice, and today I feel like this topic is going to be so powerful for so many people, especially if you are in a season of, just walking in the purpose and being who God called you to be. If you watched the podcast from last week, we talked about not only rebuilding your life, but we talked about self self projection, right? And which is really, really, I see a lot in the women that I work with, and I saw it in myself as well, on how when you have low self esteem, right, or you have a low self image of yourself, you allow people to self project on how they feel about you, right? So what am I saying? What I'm saying is when you don't have that confidence that and you're looking for that affirmation or that affirmation or validation from other people, you find yourself allowing other people to self project how they see their self on you. I did a workshop in the month of June. And if you're new here, I help moms to heal from their past trauma so they can tap into their power, their purpose, and their full potential. And today we're going to talk about the full potential of rebuilding yourself after trauma. But you often self project we often, right? We often find ourselves we often right we often find ourselves in positions of allowing other people to project how they feel on us. I'm gonna give you an example. So I was given us to have a workshop, and the workshop was designed for um, a parent workshop. And this workshop was to help moms to start transitioning from a place and operating from a parenting style of low self-esteem, a low self-image, to operate in a parenting style that is going to allow them to walk in their purpose and more in their power um in their parenting, right? So I'm just tell you a little backstory of me, right? And one of the things that God showed me, He said, when we was coming up, he used this metaphor. You know how when we was coming up, and our parents used to say, you're gonna watch what you wear when you go out there, because you are a reflection of me, right? We all remember that, right? We all remember our parents always saying it to me, like, when you walk out this door, you are a reflection of me, right? So I want you to look at that context of us being a reflection of our parents, not only with the way that we act, but also the way that we act, right? The way that we act, it actually shows on what's happening in the inside of us, right? And a lot of times our kids, and a lot of times God designed for our children to get their identity and their nurturing and their protection from the mother and the father. And the reason why a lot of parents are not operating their role as a mother effectively, is because they did not know their role in the get-go. And I'm only speaking for myself. I did not know my role as a mother. I did not know my role and how I can be able to give this child what I know and I felt in my heart and my core. And I'm going to talk about that core later on in the podcast. But I always felt like I had this desire to be this amazing mother to all my children, but I doubted myself a lot. I doubted my decisions in being a parent. You know what I'm saying? Like, my parenting was always criticized because my parenting style was always different from my family. My parenting style was always different from how my rest of my family parent their kids. And because it was different, it was questioned. And because it was so different, it made me not only question myself, because I was different as well. Not only did it question, which a lot of bloodline breakers, if you are called to be a bloodline breaker and you think differently than your bloodline, you know what I'm saying? You act differently than your bloodline. The reason why you act differently and you operate differently is because God have designed you to walk in a way that was differently from the world, right? He tells us, do not be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed with the renewing of your minds. So a lot of times God put different things inside of your womb so you will act different, and be different. But the thing about that is, when we are want our mother and our father approval so bad, what end up happening is we end up conforming to what they said because it's more it will keep the peace, or you know what I'm saying, we feel accepted being who they want us to be, and we feel rejected if we be the opposite of what they want us to be. Because how dare we be different than what they want, how dare we be different than how they want us to be? How dare us talk different? How dare I parent my children different than my parents parent them, and parent or my grandfather and all of them, right? And this is the thing, when once I had the revelation, like, okay, this is just not right. Right. Once I had the revelation is, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think you're supposed to talk to your child like this. I don't think you're supposed to bully your child like this. I always had a sensitivity to my parenting. I remember all the way back when I only had my first child, and God have always spoke to me, even when I was in sin. He always spoke to me, right? And He said to me, He put a unction in my spirit, like, you are being your child's first bully, right? And once I understood that, I started asking God. I said, God, I don't want to be his first bully, right? And I understood from only having one child. Now, mind y'all, I had my baby when I was 16 years old. Okay, you're talking about a 16-year-old mother had this type of mind frame. 17-year-old mom, 18-year-old mom, I had this type of wisdom that I don't want to be my child's first bully, right? But because these things that I was thinking was always questioned, I suppressed it a lot. So I suppressed the parent I wanted to be, and I started conforming to the parent that everybody else wanted me to be. That's why it's so important for you to always operate from your authentic self and who God called you to be, and what you know for a fact that God called you to be, versus you know what I'm saying, conforming to the ways of the world, or conforming to what Pop said, or what your grandma said, or what your daddy said, right? Because a lot of times, I want you to understand something. A generational curse is nothing. A generational curse is nothing but thinking patterns, right? Everybody in the bloodline thought the same, and because everybody thought the same, guess what? Everybody, they involved themselves with the same sin. Everyone did the same sin. Everyone, you know what I'm saying, thought the same, right? And that created the same patterns, right? That created the same pattern that was passed down through generations, right? I talked about this. I did a podcast of not too long ago, where I was talking about, how the enemy will have uh, you to encounter the same experiences as your forefathers, for you to have the same trauma response. So you will end up having the same thinking patterns. And so this demonic cycle, or this generational curse, can continue to the 34th generation, right? Just think about it. Say, for instance, right? You was molested or you was raped, and your mother was molested and she was raped, right? And your mother ended up becoming a drug addict, and then coincidentally you become a drug addict. Or maybe, you know what I'm saying, you had your baby at a young age, and you went into survivor mode trying to provide for this child, and you didn't want to be an abusive mom. You didn't want to be, you know what I'm saying, a selfish mom. You didn't want to be a mom that chose men before your children, but you end up falling in the same trap, or the same patterns, or the same thinking, or the same sin as your forefathers. It was easy because it was already in your DNA and RNA. And so when you was called to stand out, to be different, that's how you know that God wants to do something new in that bloodline, because you was called to be different. And how dare you shoot down what God told you to be in order to help other people? So today, that's just the opening of the gist of what I have for you today, right? I want you to understand that God put an image inside of you before you was born, right? He put an image inside of you before you was born. That's why a lot of people, like, man, they have this confliction. Like, I know I'm supposed to be doing this. I knew I was called to do this, but I'm doing this. They don't really feel fulfilled. They feel like they're just going through the motions. They feel like they're just going through, you know what I'm saying, going through cycles. And then they get a job, right? And then this job, they feel alive. They feel vibrant. They feel fulfilled. That's because they started finding out where they was conducive to grow. It is so important for us and ourselves. And I just talked about this last month on the podcast, that as we learn to give ourselves what we need, and we learn to give our children what they need, they will end up being able to thrive at a level that you was never able to thrive. Now I know a lot of times we live in a world that we feel like, we got to give our kids the latest Jordans, the latest clothes. But how about we be so focused on giving them the affirmation, the guidance, and the love and the acceptance that we never got. Maybe you were someone like me. I never felt accepted by my family. So when you start accepting who you are and walking in your authentic self, you will give your children, right? Because your children is the reflection of you and how you see yourself. And once you start being confident and happy and joyful, guess what? You're gonna give your children that ability to be able to walk in who they are. You're gonna give them the permission to be who they are because you're walking in your authentic self, right? So I want you to understand that God put an image inside of you before you was born. He said that I made man in my image. Okay. So if God said that I made man in my image, how can I show up and be this pure person that I was called to be? You got to capture the image that God gave you when you got saved. Now I'm talking to everyone. When I'm talking to the people that you're newly saved, you're on fire for God, and you know God put an image inside of you, but you having a hard time to develop this image. You know God put a Kodak picture inside of you, but you're having a hard time to become this picture. You have a hard time to prune this picture. You have a hard time to be developed and become this person God has called you to be because the old you is more familiar than the new you, right? So you have these two images, and they're roaring or they're colliding against each other every single day. So I want to start to ask you a question. Who do you say you are? Who do you say you are? I'm not talking, and I want you to do some self reflection here. I'm not talking about what your mama said you was. I'm not talking about who your daddy said you was. And if that's all you get, then that's all you get. What do I mean? If all you got is who your mama said you was and who your daddy said you was, because you don't really know, but you got this image inside of you that's telling you that you're wealthy, you're this and you're that, but you see yourself walking in the image of your earthly father and your earthly mother. What's happening is you have now taken on a false identity due to your trauma. And in order for you to step into this new place, you got to be willing to let go of that old image so you can step into the new image. So I want to ask you, just do some self reflection. Who are you? Who are you? Who was you called to be? What moves you? What is your X? And I want you to really, really be really, really zoomed into your X. I hate when people, I know hate is a strong word. I dislike when people talk about, um, I dislike when people talk about the homeless. I dislike when people look at the homeless as less than. I dislike that. I really do. I really do. I dislike when they look at the homeless and treat them like nothing. I dislike that. And this is why that have always been my ick, right? And that's because I have a desire to want to feed the homeless, right? That is that heart, that is that connection I have with my earthly father. Because if you look in the Bible, God, He give you, and they're called alms, right? Alms is when you give to the poor, God give right back to you, right? But it was a man in the book in the act at the book of Acts when he had gave so much to the alms. They said that his alms had reached heaven, right? Like he was diligent, he was a good man, he was an honorable man. He prayed every single day and he gave alms, right? Which means he gave to the poor. So that is the attribute that I have from my heavenly Father. That I love giving to the poor, and I don't like when people mistreat the poor. It really hurts my feelings because I look at it like this: like just because that he's strong out, just because that she's strong out, that does not mean that that's not God's child. Right. So I have that connection with my earthly father. Don't harm the the poor, or you know what I'm saying. Don't treat the drug addicts a different type of way just because they're drug addicts. Right. Now I'm gonna say act with wisdom. Don't let you know what I'm saying. A drug addict or a homeless person in your car if you don't feel comfortable, right? I'm not saying don't do that, but what I'm saying is treat them how you know God wants you to be. want you to be treated. Okay. So a lot of people that is stepping who God have called them to be, they suffer from imposter syndrome, right? But I want you to let you know, imposter syndrome, it leads to disobedience. This is why. Because it makes you feel that you're disqualified for the very thing that God is telling you to do. And if how many people know that we all do this, right? We submit more to the identity that was given to us by our earthly fathers and mothers than the identity that was given to us by our heavenly Father, right? And we end up being so much wanting our mothers and our fathers' approval that we end up operating in this imposter syndrome because our identity or our image have not been fully developed. But instead of us developing our image, we stay in this imposter syndrome stage, and you can't do that, right? So you need to let go of the image. And how do you do this? You start reimagining who you are, right? Now, I looked up the word reimagine. I thought it was so powerful when I looked up this word reimagine. But reimagine is the ability to capture a new picture, a new mental picture of yourself in a new and to see yourself in a new light, right? So what this means is you are allowing the image, excuse me, y'all, my allergies. You are allowing the image of God to be developed and mature inside of you, right? But you're allowing yourself to capture a new image in your mental state. Because once you're able to capture this new image, you're able to nurture this new image. Now, what does that mean? One of the things that I started doing is I started buying business attire. Why? Because I'm a businesswoman. I cannot tell you how, when I was 16 years old, I always knew I was called to entrepreneurship. I remember as young as 16 years old, I used to tell people like I'm gonna own the daycare. Um, I'm gonna own daycare, I'm gonna own houses. I always knew this. Always knew this, right? And in order for me to step into this role as a boss, as an entrepreneur, I had to start waking up and just putting on anything. I had to start waking up and just putting on, you know what I'm saying, a t-shirt and some shorts, and which is cool. Don't get me wrong, that's cool. But when you are developing a new image, you have to be cautious on what you're putting on. You have to be, you know what I'm saying, you have to be cautious. You have to be cautious with, you know what I'm saying, stepping into this new role. And one of the ways that I had to step into this new role is I had to start buying the clothes that and start dressing like the woman I wanted to be. I had to start eating like her. I had to start responding like her. I had to start, you know what I'm saying, stop compromising her, right? What do I mean by that? Stop suppressing her. That's what compromising means. It means that you're willing you're willing to be somebody else, or you're willing to compromise your peace, your mental health, to satisfy somebody else's needs while you're suffering. And you wondering why you're depressed. You depressed because you're choosing to suppress who you really are to satisfy their needs, and it's actually killing you in the long run, right? So I seen this quote on face Instagram, and it's a group of women that, you know what I'm saying, they help moms to be their authentic self, right? They help moms not to be their authentic selves, but to be the authentic mom that they want to be. And I talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, which is going to lead me to my next point: core values and beliefs. Getting back to that, right? So many times when we go through trauma, we leave our core beliefs, we leave our core values, we leave the things that, you know what I'm saying, that we stood for. We leave the things that, we leave the things that we stood for. We leave those things, and we end up standing for things that don't even matter. We end up standing for things, you know what I'm saying, that, you know what I'm saying, that's not gonna work in the long run, right? We end up We end up standing for those things, and we're no longer standing for the right thing. And the right thing that we need to be standing for is what God placed in the inside of us, our core beliefs, because that's what our purpose is, y'all. Right? Another thing I had to do, I had to start going to different space in the morning time. Like when my kids get up, you know, I don't have an office right now. Right. But business, when what they have offices. I had to start driving to my nearest office and start renting out an office until I'm able to have my own building to, to put to build my content in. You know what I'm saying? Meet with different clients. I started renting out a space specifically for me. Why did I start doing this? I had to change my environment because a lot of times we would end up putting ourselves in environments that's not conducive for us to grow. What am I saying? We end up putting ourselves around people, places, you know what I'm saying, that don't know that no that don't no longer serve us, but we find ourselves in these places. We find ourselves with these people, right? And the reason why, and I saw this today on I think I forgot his name, but he talked about it in his one of his preaching. He said the reason why we don't let certain people go and reason why we don't allow God to turn that page is because we know in the next chapter, those people that we have been around our whole life is not going to be in the next chapter. We know that they're not going to be in that chapter, and since we are afraid to know what life will be like without them, we are willing to stay in a comfortable situation that's no longer conducive for us. We're willing to stay with relationships. We're willing to stay connected to our family. Let's be honest. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about it. We're willing to, you know what I'm saying, allow our moms, our dads, our sisters, our cousins, just because they're family, treat us any kind of way, and we end up compromising our peace. Because you got to understand something. If you're compromising your peace, which means you're approving their peace. What do I mean by that? Which means is you're letting them walk over you and say what they want to say to you, treat you any kind of way. Meanwhile, you over here angry at them and they don't even know because you are allowing them to treat you any kind of way. You're allowing it. You're allowing them to hurt you. You're allowing it. You're allowing them to say whatever they want to say because you don't like confrontation, and you're compromising your peace so they can be at peace with who they are. Meanwhile, you are toiling with who you are because you're refusing to be who God called you to be. Now, I'm not only talking about you, I'm talking about I went through a season of this. Do you hear me? I went and I toiled with myself because some conversations I did not want to have, and I had to have it. You know what I'm saying? It's some people I did not want to release that I had no choice but to release. It was some habits that I wanted to hold on to that I knew I could not hold on to because those habits was killing me. And had I kept hold to those habits, I would have never been able to adapt the new habits that I knew God had wanted me to adapt. One of the new habits I had to wake up every single day, do my breathing techniques. Every single day I had to wake up, you know what I'm saying, and meditate on the word of God. Literally sit there and meditate for 10, 15 minutes, right? Another habit I had to adapt. And for 4 to 5 days out the week, I had to exercise and move my body. Why? Because I have always been a healthy, cautious person as long as I remember, 18, 19, 20 years old. When I saw myself gaining weight, I would, you know what I'm saying, try to exercise, but I didn't understand the power of these new habits. I didn't understand it. What I love about the book Atomic Habits is you literally become a new person when you change your habits, right? So let me give you an example. A person, say for instance, they did a drastic transformation. They lost 150, 125 pounds, and they never picked that weight back up. But the reason why I never picked that weight back up because they never became that person again. And anytime they gain that weight back, it's when they start adapting the old habits of what they learned, right? One of the things the Holy Spirit said to me, he said, Shanice, one of the things that I tore you with was putting myself first, right? And actually taking care of myself and getting out of that mind frame of survival to a place of thriving. We know how it is when you survive, you know what I'm saying? Putting yourself last, not drinking your water, neglecting your needs, putting other people's needs before yours, compromising your peace, not having those difficult conversations. We know all of that, right? Um, and he said, remember, that's how you lost yourself in the first place. I lost myself by putting everybody else's needs before me. before mine. I lost myself trying to satisfy other people. I lost myself, you know what I'm saying, trying to be there for everybody else and was not there for myself. That's how I lost myself in the first place. So every time I go back to those bad habits of compromising, being people pleasing and all of that, what I'm doing is I'm saying that my relationship with them is more important than me, right? Every time I go and I'm saying cheat on, I ain't gonna say a diet, but the lifestyle change that I choose to change by eating more healthy. Every time I go, and I learned this from a podcast, every time you go through the Wendy's, you know what I'm saying? Um, because you have to understand fast food, it's okay to have fast food. One of the habits I adapt to, I eat fast food once a week. And that because we have to understand those that though the restaurants, they have all type of, like, they cook with all type of, what I'm saying, high cortisol oils, what I'm saying, processed, so much processed, right? So I had to change that. One thing I noticed is when I'm stressed, that's when I end up falling back into my bad habits. So it wasn't the fact that I needed to lose weight. I needed to lose weight, but not only did I need to lose weight, but I had to, what I'm saying, I had to start dealing with my stress. I had to start running from hard things and start facing hard things. And that's another thing too. Like, I was not okay with facing things that I needed to face. I was too quick to say, you know what I'm saying, um, put it on the back burner. One of the things that I did this year, and I'm very proud of that, is I got my license back, y'all. And y'all probably thinking like, girl, you 34 years old, somebody, you got your license back. I had lost my license a couple of years ago. And I wanted my license, but I was not willing to go to court. I was scared. I didn't want to face that, right? But had I not faced, I had to come to the mindset of this. What can these mere mortal people do to me? And God gonna make a way. Y'all, the getting my license back was so easy. I did have to come out a lot of money, right? I came out like $1,000 to getting it back, but uh, it was worth it because now I ain't gotta, catch rides or be afraid to drive on the streets because I don't want to get tickets. It was so easy, right? And facing that allowed me to say to myself, I can face hard things and it's gonna be okay, right? So that was another thing that I had to face. But this podcast, I want you to start like reimagining who you are. Get back to those core values. And look at this. If you lose that relationship, any relationship, remember you're gaining a relationship with yourself. That's more important. Because for me, my depression was connected to suppression. My depression was connected to suppressing who I really was to satisfy other people. My depression was the depression I used to go through. It was because I was not walking in my authentic self. So you thinking that you got mental issues, baby, you just not being who you was called to be. That's all. And one of the Bible verses God gave me this year is Isaiah 58:11. He said, I will satisfy your dry and scorched soul. That God will continuously lead me and guide me and satisfy my dry and scorched soul, making me a well-watered garden. Right? I want you to understand your garden is your heart. Okay. So what God is saying, right, in John 15, he's saying that anything that's not bearing fruit, I'm gonna cut it off. So those bad habits, those relationships, that unforgiveness, that bitterness, he'll cut it off. But the reason why he's cutting it off because he's making those dry places, right? Those dry places, that deliverance, the inner healing, he's making you a well watered garden. And even though it's painful, like I'm telling y'all, like I went through a season of straight loneliness, no friendships whatsoever. But that was to disconnect me from the things that no longer serve me, but also gave me quiet time to really sit and center myself and know what did I really wanted. So I could just stop doing stuff just to say I'm doing stuff, just to stop saying, oh, I got a podcast or, oh, I got a business. No, center yourself so you can get back to what you really wanted to do. So a couple of habits I adapt, right? I started shopping at Cider because for business attire. I rented me out a little place that I would go record my content because I needed a fresh space, right? I hired a video editor to edit my videos so I can be more professional. You know what I'm saying? I just started I let go of limited beliefs that was telling me I did not have enough money to do certain things. And I start tapping to the limitless supply that God has for me. And let me tell you something. When I let go of those limited beliefs, it allowed me to flow in the abundance that God had for me the whole time that I was not able to see. I was not able to see the abundance that God had for me because I had those limited beliefs and they was holding me back. So I just want to encourage somebody today, like imagine who you want to be and take the necessary steps that you need to take to step into her. And it's going to be a season that people don't recognize it. It's going to be a season that people don't recognize it. But as long as you recognize it. And when other people catch on, they catch on. If they never catch on, that's fine too. Because God just wants you to be who God called you to be. It's time for us to let go of the disobedience and the stiff neckedness and walk into the change that God has for us. Now, if this blessed you and you need help with this, I encourage you to hit the link below, comment below, rebuild, reimagine, and I would not only get the link over to you for to schedule your one-on-one, but I will also get a link over to you so you can see what traumas that you're operating in that you need to what type of trauma you have. Now, if you I mean just a little disclaimer, I help people with 5 different type of traumas. You probably think like, girl, is that many? Yes, it is. You got generational trauma, you got complex trauma, you got childhood trauma, you got acute trauma, and you also have brain fart, child, generational trauma, complex trauma, acute trauma, childhood trauma, and you also have developmental trauma, right? There's 5 different traumas that I help people to navigate through. Developmental trauma and childhood trauma goes hand to hand. Acute trauma and generational, no, acute trauma go hand in hand with complex trauma. No, acute trauma and generational trauma go hands in hand. Complex trauma is just an event that you had that you have lost yourself. You need to get back to her. So, but yeah, comment on this video and I will get it back over to you guys. And join me next week for episode 8. And we're going to talk about releasing those limited beliefs through meditation. See ya.